My wife and I spent the night camping along the Klamath River on California Highway 96 in the late summer or early fall of 1999. A realtor, whose office we visited in Willow Creek that afternoon, told us it was dangerous to camp along there and advised against even driving that route. He wouldn't say why. But we were very experienced campers in our late 40s, and for a couple of years had been traveling the back roads of the West in our newest rig, a 26-foot Prowler fifth wheel. By then, we felt very comfortable that what we'd been doing and were used to making our own decisions about such things. In case of security problems, I had several firearms aboard. However, I did notice that nobody else was camping along that lonely stretch of road. Not that it bothered me, because I enjoy relative solitude and natural surroundings. I wasn't keeping my journal during that period, which in retrospect was pretty dumb. So I can only roughly guess precisely where we camped. It was beyond Happy Camp, and I believe about halfway from there to Hamburg, perhaps in the vicinity of Syad Creek. I can't say for sure because I simply don't remember by looking at a good map of the area. I may be well off the mark. I distinctly remember the terrain, however. I was looking for mountain property and recall being somewhat disappointed because the terrain in that area wasn't quite as dramatic as I was hoping. Which is not to say it didn't appear steep, wild, and very rugged in some places, and the general area quite isolated. I stopped for the night, where the mountains were the most dramatic of anything we saw along the entire route, and parked off the highway in a nice clearing, sort of a primitive rest area below some very high and dramatic cliffs, with the river at their base, and us camped on the other side of the canyon. That evening, just as it was getting dark, and I was outside enjoying the wild surroundings as my wife was busy preparing dinner on our trailer, I heard a loud, frantic scream, more like a shriek, emanating from the vicinity of a high promontory several hundred feet above the river. It was very eerie and unlike any natural sound I'd ever heard. It was much too loud to be from a bobcat or a large bird of prey, too high-pitched to be from a bear, and too strange, prolonged, and peculiar to be from a mountain lion. Nevertheless, it was definitely from a large, non-human animal of some sort. It didn't frighten me because it was well above us, but I got the distinct impression that the scream was territorial in nature and directed at us. A more skittish camper might have packed up and left right then, but whatever it was seemed to have no intention of coming out of its mountain fastness to cause us any harm, so long as we minded our own business and stayed put. After that, we spent an uneventful and peaceful night. I had an encounter in the early 1980s in Starr County. I lived on a ranch and I spent much of my free time exploring. One day, I was exploring the property with my single-shot .22 rifle. It was spring and there had been rainfall, so the grass and weeds were tall. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a large animal running. I assumed it was one of my dad's horses. Then, the beast came into view. It was much about 30 yards away. It looked very much like a gorilla, but its fur was reddish-brown. It was running on all fours, exactly like a gorilla. I was stunned. I didn't dare take a shot because this animal was massive, and a .22 would only piss it off. I could see its muscles undulating under its fur. I decided not to tell anyone, and I never thought of a Bigfoot because I thought Bigfoot was exclusively bipedal. Many years later, I confided the story to my son. Then I saw a show about Bigfoot in East Texas, and the witnesses described the exact same thing I had seen: a reddish, brown, ape-like creature on all fours. My son revealed my secret to my relatives, and I was ridiculed as expected. You may be interested to know that my husband and I have seen what we believe to be a Bigfoot in Butte County, California. To our knowledge, nothing of this nature has been seen here before. On April 16th, 1969, around midnight, we were driving along the road from Paradise to Sterling City. The surrounding country is thickly wooded, well-watered, and crisscrossed by deep canyons. As we drove around a long curve, our headlights shone on what appeared to be a man in a fursuit crossing the road. For one moment we had a front view as he turned towards the car, then walked into darkness. Our impressions are that he was over 6 feet tall, completely covered with short black hair which seemed to be flecked with either white hairy patches or mud. His face was white and hairless, although the features appeared as a blur. The eyes did not glow in the light, as would be the eyes of an animal. The head was small and came to a peak at the top. He was heavily built with particularly heavy legs. He did not run, but shuffled away with a definite limp. Once turning his head to look back at our car. The following morning I returned to the area to look for footprints, but could find nothing. The ground near the road is rock, gravel, and hard clay. We have lived in this area for nearly 10 years. My husband is a writer and photographer, specializing in outdoor stories for such publications as Field and Stream and Sports Afield. I mention this with the hope that you will believe we are reasonable people, not given to hallucinations brought on by the novelty of a backwoods road at midnight. Naturally, we have given a great deal of thought to what it could have been, other than a Bigfoot. A bear is out. There are bears in Butte County, but all are smaller and do not cross highways on their hind legs. The idea of a hoax occurred to us. Chico State College is about 30 miles away, and this is the sort of involved trick that might appeal to a college student, except that on a weeknight, during a non-hunting or fishing season, this is a very lonely road. The chances of a motorist passing until morning are slim. We even thought of the possibility of someone bent on a robbery, expecting that a motorist would stop at an apparition. But again, the lack of traffic makes this very unlikely. I have an encounter of sorts I would like to share. It happened back in the summer of 1995 in Edcouch, Texas. I was 15 years old at the time. I'm 37 now, and remember it like it was yesterday. Well, this one night I had a buddy of mine come over. We wanted to rent some video games and movies, so I asked my mom if I could borrow the car and head out. She said no, and I had a fit, blew a gasket teenage style. I stormed out of the house and walked down the street to cool down. I didn't even bother telling my friend, I just left. I walked down to the end of the street, where the street lamps didn't shine. I took a seat right at the middle of the street and put my head down. At that time, my old neighborhood was right next to a cornfield, and the rest of the lots were filled with overgrown, dry, tall grass and an abundance of mesquite trees. We also had an old meat market that had closed down some years before, and was now just an empty, vandalized building. The meat market was located on the opposite side of the block, and therefore my street was on the back side of the property. So I parked myself down and just breathed. I'd gone back there into the dark because that's where my friends and I used to frequent, smoke weed and cigarettes, so I knew the property. Anyway, as I sat there, I remember looking up at the sky and noticed how bright the moon was, how the breeze was pushing the trees from side to side. Suddenly, I heard a rustling sound behind me. I turned back, and there was a big opossum scurrying away from me. I sighed in relief and turned back around. That's when I heard it. An extremely loud, deep roar. I picked my head up and just froze. I didn't even move. All I did was scan the dark, empty lot in front of me. All I saw was darkness. I also remember feeling the bass of the roar. I could feel it in my chest. If I could compare it to anything, it sounded like a lion in a movie or something. I told myself to get up and run, but I just couldn't. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I told myself to run, and run I did. I don't think I've ever ran faster than that. I got home, and my mom, sister, and friend were outside on the front porch waiting on me. They asked me what was wrong. I guess I looked a little scared and told them that I heard something. I remember that feeling of a cold sweat in my gut and knots. At that time, I believed it to be the devil, maybe coming after me for being such a little jerk with my mom. Now, I don't know. I really now think it was a Sasquatch. We don't have any big game in this part of Texas like bears. We do have boar, deer, bobcats, ocelots, and of course, opossums. But nothing that could have made a sound like that. I rarely talk of it, but we did see something we could not explain. Before living here in Oklahoma, we lived on the Navajo Reservation in Tisile, Arizona. Lived in Fort Defiance a while before that, but it was when I was in Tisile living there with the wife on the compound that we had our run-in with what the friend with us called the man of the forest. I had an old 1977 Toyota Land Cruiser. I bought it in Illinois for the sole purpose of beating the snot out of it in Arizona on the Red Rock, and I did. Best $1,700 I've spent on anything with four wheels. But anyway, thinking it would be cool, I took the hardtop bolts off and hoisted it up on a tree limb. Never could get it back on after four-wheeling, so we drove it with the top open all the time, and that is how we were that day. Three of us, me driving, my friend Wayne, one of the natives living in Fort Defiance, but visiting, and Oni, my other Zuni friend. All I can tell you is we turned right after going east a ways towards Navajo, New Mexico. Went towards Lake something high up at 8,000 plus feet to the lake itself. As I recall, there we lived at 7,400 feet in Tisile, so it was not really like it was long to get that much higher, but it was dirt, mud, ruts, and three stoners from the 60s. One not sure where the hell he was. The other two just having a great time, showing off the cliff dwellings and other places not found on any map. We were going to see one that day that I had not seen. We never touched anything, just some photos and a few kind words, and we left. Very respectful. Anyway, as we drove higher, it really got dense. The wild herd of escaped cattle was running to the one side of the cruiser, and we were top and doorless, so we had a grand view of these absolutely huge wild bulls running from us with the herd. Wild horses down a bit further, and I knew we were up in some wild places. Wayne told me they got out and they were basically like the rest of the animals now, afraid of man and pretty much huntable, as he put it. He said we spooked them or something did. Oni thought it was strange that they ran like that from us, and he no sooner said that than this thing ran in front of us as we turned to switch back in the road. The bank to my left was 7 feet from the road to the next foothold, and I was looking up at it and looking back out straight through the windshield of the cruiser. Plain as day was a burnt, reddish-colored beast with hair, and his back to me standing on 2 legs. 2 steps, I kid you not here, 2 steps leaping up on the second like some kind of basketball dunk master, and this thing is up like an acrobat, lands on 2 legs, and is out of there, just like that. It happened just so fast, you know? I mean, just like that. I started slowing, and Wayne quite loudly started going, "No, don't stop. Keep going. Keep going. You don't want to meet him. Just go." So that's what we did. I did not see a face. I'd never seen any bear jump like that, though. Pretty dang long front paws, too, now that I think back some. Whatever it was every bit the size of the 2 bears on display in the Anchorage, Alaska airport killed by the Oklahoma dentists. One of them was about the same color, actually, and size. It said it was like 1,200 pounds. If bears can leap like that, they are powerful creatures, I tell you that. The only thing close to it happened about 15 years ago. I was hiking by myself in the Makelumne wilderness on a trail that sees very little use. About 5 miles from the trailhead, which was 5 miles on a dirt road from a gravel road that was 5 miles from the pavement, I walked past a giant deadfall that consisted of a number of trees that had fallen together to form a giant structure of interlocking vertical and horizontal logs. As I went by, I was assaulted by an intense smell. It was as if someone had gotten a couple hundred stinky old dogs wet and extracted the smell and concentrated it down. I didn't see or hear anything. Several hours later, when I went by again on my way out, there was no trace of the smell, and the wind had not shifted. The source of the smell was no longer there. My incident with being followed happened on a camping trip. I had camped in the spot several times over the years, alone and with others. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision to go that night, and I left well after dark. I'd ran those hills in daylight and dark for over 20 years, so I knew where I was going. I had worked that day, and combined with a 2-hour hike carrying about 60 pounds, I was tired. I got a fire going and made something to eat and sat down and read for a little while. I got very sleepy and turned in around 2,200 hours and went right to sleep. Around 02:30, I woke with the overwhelming feeling I was in mortal danger. There was no sound or smell, and I couldn't see anything, but that feeling kept getting more intense by the second. I spent untold hours in the woods when I was younger, and would on occasion get what I call feelings, and I'd always stop and listen intently, and on all but one, it turned out to be people close by. The other time, it was a dog. Whatever was causing this was coming from the trail that I followed into the campsite. I watched and listened for several minutes, but couldn't see anything. There was enough light that anything coming that way would have been silhouetted. I was armed and had a SIG 220 45 ACP pistol and an HK91A2, but they didn't alleviate the feeling of danger that had gotten so intense I was having difficulty breathing. I sat there in my sleeping bag for quite a while with the rifle pointed down the trail, until the feeling became so intense, I knew that I had to get out of there. I got my boots on and rolled up my sleeping bag and packed, and started out of the site in the opposite direction that I'd taken in. I knew exactly where I was and knew where I wanted to go, and I started out there doing the Belfast twirl every other step. I kept thinking my mind could be playing tricks on me, and then I began to hear footsteps following along with me. At first I wasn't sure as I was moving steadily, and once I started hearing the footsteps, I stopped and faced the direction they were coming from. When I stopped, there was a couple of footfalls and then silence. I waited and listened and then started walking again. I walked a short distance and stopped, and again there were a couple of footfalls and then silence. I knew the trail I wanted to get to start over the hill and get back home, and it was a little less than a mile from where I had camped. The stopping and starting continued all the way to the trails, with the footsteps still following. I hit the trail and started uphill, and after I got about 100 yards up, the danger feeling just went away. It was very weird. 1 second, I felt like I was in danger, and the next, it was gone. I stopped and listened, and couldn't hear the footsteps anymore, but I kept checking behind me all the way home. I kept thinking my mind could be playing tricks on me. I don't know what was following me, as I never saw a thing, but these were bipedal footsteps. I've heard from other people of strange things happening in that general area. Hey everyone, Dismal Hero here. Thanks for checking out the video, and if you like what you saw, make sure to subscribe so you're always up to date with my new videos. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.